My name is Kru Rob Rogan, and I'm the co-owner of Square Circle New York, and this is my story. Basically, we've had our school for about since 2012. So that's now we're in 2022, so that's about a good decade right now. I've been practicing Muay Thai now, teaching, training, competing in it since I was 25. So that would be about 26 years. So I love the sport. So it's given me a lot of good things. I've met a lot of great people. I've learned a lot of things. When I continue to learn things about people, about limitations, and how to help people reach their goals.
So, Kru Rob, how did you get into Muay Thai?
So it was actually kind of by accident. I had just graduated from school, and I had moved into Manhattan with my own apartment, and I was trying to get into fitness. There was a Crunch location on University Street. I don't think it's even there anymore. Went over there, and I was doing some strength and conditioning with a bunch of guys. And in the next room, I hear this, "Oi!" like this. You know, you hear those things, and it's just like, "Whoa, what's this?" And the other guy's like, "Hey, you're supposed to spot me." I was like, "Okay, I'll be there in a second." So then I would look around the corner, and I noticed that I see these guys kicking these pads and like bending them. I mean, like, you know, and it was awesome. I was just like watching all this happen. I was like, oh, I want to do this. And at that moment, I was hooked.
Is Muay Thai something you were familiar with growing up? Did you know about Muay Thai prior to that?
Interestingly enough, no. I had no idea. I knew there was kickboxing. I knew that at some point there was some sort of form of karate base and this and that, but never did I see this before. The short shorts, good fitness physiques, and just literally cracking pads. The person that was holding pads and that was teaching class is Kru Brown. So I didn't know him at the time, but I introduced myself. I said, I want to take this class. How do I do this? How do I get involved? I like everything that I'm seeing. You know, I want to learn. So and he became my first teacher.
He's not from the States, right? Like he's from across the pond.
Yes. So he's from England. His trainer back in the day, it was Master Tani. So, and there were a few other guys that, and women that had trained with him. I guess this was back in the 80s. When I met him, that was 1994, 95. And I guess he had already established himself here in New York. So, you know, he already had a career in Muay Thai and kickboxing, Thai boxing. This is how I'm kind of piecing this together as far as what I remember from what he had told us. He was part of a group that it was him, his brother Howard the Hawk Brown, there was Ronnie Green, Cash the Flash, Gil. There's a few other people that were training with and training alongside with him as far as his team was concerned. He had established himself as far as being one of the instructors teaching the kickboxing class or the kickboxing program over at Crunch. Now, a lot of people don't know this. Crunch back then was huge. So they had multiple programs of group classes going on, different things going on here and there. One of them was Thai boxing.
Now, at the time, was there even a Muay Thai scene in New York?
There were only a few big schools that existed in New York. A few of the schools that were around already, Kru Phil Nurse over at the Watt, so he was already established. Aziz over at Sitan, he was already established. Vladimir Bordin, so Bordin's gym in Brooklyn. Then there's a few other guys that were doing just purely kickboxing that were out on the island. Now, I'm not saying that these were the only people, but these were the main ones in my mind as far as like in the Muay Thai community is concerned. But these were the ones that I knew that stuck out in my mind. It was just a small group of people that in the community and really trying to grow it out. When I started training with Kru Edge, some of the guys were already training with him. Some of the guys, they were already pro. Basically had to do his research and connect with other promoters across the country because there weren't established promotions in New York. That's going to change quickly, but there weren't established promotions as of yet. So, you know, always looking and searching out across the country, and then sometimes out into Canada, and then overseas in Europe, etc., etc.
So I understand that, you know, at least on the West Coast, when Muay Thai was first brought over by, you know, some of the Fairtex crew, you know, a lot of the competitive scene was really a hybrid with I guess like the kickboxing, karate scene, right? And I think that was the model they tried to adopt. I mean, it's definitely different now. Muay Thai is a lot more mainstream. I mean, did you kind of feel it was kind of the same way back in the East Coast? It was more of like a hybrid of karate. You were trying to figure things out a little bit.
Yes. From my understanding from back then, the sanctioning bodies had already existed through karate, through taekwondo. They had already existed, and pretty much you go to what's already established and you try to make it work, right? So a lot of the officials and the sanctioning bodies, they tried to transition into Muay Thai. There were a lot of different rule sets back in the day. So international rule sets, then there were low kick rule sets, there were, I think there was something like oriental rule sets, which was kind of crazy. So I do remember seeing that on a flyer, like for a fight card. And I was just like, no, this is nuts, because it's like all these different types of rule sets to try to classify Muay Thai, in the sense that they didn't understand what low kicks were, right? So you couldn't, and then like punches to the face. The old adage was, as far as like with some of the kickboxing styles, they call it full contact. To that rule set, it was like full contact to the body and then kicks to the head, but there were no punches to the face. So you couldn't understand, when you have that mindset for Muay Thai and for kickboxing, you're throwing punches and kicks to the head. There was definitely some confusion with some of the rule sets and understanding them.
When you first started training with Kru Edge, I mean, at the time, the amount of resources, a little primitive, right?
Yeah.
Like the resources, what was available. How did you dig into, what was happening in the world with Muay Thai, aside from, what was in front of you at the time?
So there was an import-export shop. It's like a Thai grocery, or it was like a Thai gift shop at the end of Mott Street. They actually had some shorts there from Thai Smai. They always had VHS recordings of the local fights that were at Rajdamnern or Ipini. So we would go over there, and I would pick up whatever the latest ones were, just so that I could watch it and see what was happening.
And what was the competitive scene like, when you first started?
I can tell you this much: the people that were competing, it wasn't like they didn't know what they were doing. They had very, very good coaches, so you had to be on top of your game. The stuff they were doing back then is still pretty much the same as now, as far as the conditioning, the training, the techniques. It all boils down to the foundational skills. How do you pivot properly when you throw the roundhouse kick? How to throw the jab properly? How to have the proper stance? How to defend, counter? Like, all those things will always remain the same from now until the end of eternity. It's just the style or the flavor of the coach that adds to that training. That's pretty much it.
Would you say the Muay Thai community, at least let's say the tri-state area, was isolated in the tri-state area, or were there times where like, hey, we're going to compete with folks from the West Coast or the Midwest?
I wouldn't say that it was isolated. I would say that it's like we take for granted the way that we can connect with everybody now, right? Through our phones, through social media platforms. None of this existed back then. So a lot of the guys, the older generation, the generation that taught us, they relied on their contacts from who they knew, and like the relationships that they built throughout their years. As far as the East Coast, West Coast thing, West Coast was already developed, and it was always trying to set competitions back and forth. So there were a few times that I went to compete on West Coast promotions as well, and then going up into Canada. Canada had a huge base of Muay Thai.
Boxing
Yes.
had really, really deep roots on the East Coast, especially
Yes.
in New York. When you were starting in Muay Thai during that time, what was Muay Thai's relationship with boxing? Was it a relationship, or they were pretty separate?
I like to think that as far as the way that Reg was training us and teaching us, he also had a huge background in boxing, and that trickled down into our training, at least for me, anyways. So his philosophy for us was always to move, right? Have everything based off of the jab. Clinch. It was a very small part of our training. If you want to look at it from a Muay Thai perspective, it was more Muay mat.
You mentioned that some of the first major players in the New York Muay Thai scene was Phil Nurse, there's Sitan, Kru Edge, and I think Koban was in there too. I mean,
Koban was here, yeah.
So over time, how has that lineage matured?
So I'm sorry. So I didn't mention Koban. Koban was here too. So that was the generation. So my generation was back then in the 90s. Like, from there, a lot of the guys that trained under these guys opened up a lot of the gyms. So many of the owners today can trace their roots back to any 1, 2, 3, or 4 of the guys back then in the 90s. The owners of 5 Points, Kru Steve and Kru Simon, we were all training under Kru Edge. So they were the first actually of our group of guys that started an academy. They were the first two. As when Kru Edge, he left to go to San Francisco with his family, kind of broke up our team here. So but you know, things have to keep moving, right? So they were the first to branch out. Hines Combat Sports, so Sean Hines, so we also trained together. He did go on and train with Roban and a few other guys, and I think Aziz at Sitan. But all those guys, like, we all trained together. Kru Natalie from Chok Sabai. She was actually a student of Steve and Simon from 5 Points. I think there's 2 Bridges, and then I think it's a combination of some of the guys from Chok Sabai and the Watt and Sitan. Everybody can pretty much trace their lineage back to one of the original guys back in the 90s.
And not just the gym owners, but a lot of promotions now too, right? AFL's Freedom.
Correct. There was a huge promotion back in the time, and that was Friday Night Fights. And that was started out of Church Street Boxing Gym. As a matter of fact, the first couple of events were filmed there.
So how did you come around to opening up your own gym?
Good question. So let's see, when Kru Edge left, it was 2001, 2002, somewhere around there. So he actually, it's for family obligations, you know, they moved out west. Everybody was scrambling to figure out what they were going to do. I can't speak for the other guys, but I know that I bounced around a little bit. I went over to Kru Nestor over at the Ultimate Gym. Then I left it alone. I left it alone for a while, and I started going back to focusing on work and this and that. And then I actually came back to it again, and the teaching out on the island. Whenever on the weekends, what we would do is we would go visit Kru B's parents, and there was a gym out there, a Thai sport. And then the next thing you know, started getting friendly with the owner, showing them some of the techniques that we do, and then started helping to teach the Muay Thai classes as well. After staying out on the island and teaching and stuff like that, and the guys started getting pretty good, and you know, they wanted to do competition in the city. I already had that established relationship, so I started making the phone calls and getting the contact information, then bringing the guys back into the city, and then it was like, you know what, I want to be here again. It's kind of like I left the Manhattan community to just train out on the island, and which is kind of weird. It's a weird saying, but we made it all possible by training with Kru Brandon over at Evolution Muay Thai. We started training over there and started helping him teach some of the classes and helping him grow out his business, and you know, I'm forever grateful for meeting him.
And you know, you opened up your gym, and how'd you come up with the name Square Circle?
So this is actually a pretty crazy story. So we wanted to incorporate symbols or signs of the martial arts. So like for Muay Thai, it's the boxing ring, right? So that's the square or the diamond, and then the circle was supposed to represent the cage. So we had an octagon, right? So we put the diamond shape next to the octagon, and then we put all the names in Thai, right, for square and then for circle. That's how we came up with our first design. And sure enough, when we went to send it off to get it trademarked, we get a letter, a cease and desist letter from the lawyers from the UFC. So the UFC told us that it's a cease and desist letter to stop trying to trademark a trademark that they own on the octagon. We went to a lawyer, and the lawyer told us they don't own a trademark to the shape, because that would mean every stop sign in America, they'd have an issue with the government. But what they do have is tons of money. And you guys are a small little nobody trying to get started. It's in your best interest to just change it. You keep the name, but change the design, because they'll tie this up in court. She's like, I can do this for you, but it's gonna cost a lot of money.
So Kru Rob, tell me a little bit about your experience being a gym owner out here in Manhattan.
Well, it's a business, as anything else is. You know, I hate to say it, but it's gotta make some money. You cannot be doing this, especially here in New York City, without a plan, a model, some accounting, and then also being able to market yourself. It's a lot of these things, and one thing I'm going to say is that it is not easy. You can stand there in the ring, you go 20 rounds with some guy that's like a champion and get your head bashed in. Yeah, I'll do that all day. But then like when it's here, it's like you got to pay the rent. You have to save some money. You have to do the insurance. You have to pay your employees and stuff. But I'm here. I'm doing it. So.
What do you want your students to take away from the time that they spend with you?
Hopefully, what they can take away from the training and the technique side, maybe some of the some of the discipline that we had here, as far as that they can apply to themselves afterward, the respect, the responsibility, you know, having character, to just know that was something, a special moment in time for those people. And then like if they were able to pass it down, that would be great too.
Rob, what does Muay Thai mean to you?
Muay Thai means everything to me. It means friendship, relationships, happiness. I actually feel like I've developed a lot better as a person through Muay Thai. All the schooling that I've done and you know, like formal schooling, undergrad, graduate school, working in all these different places, it hasn't given me as much of a return as far as satisfaction as Muay Thai has done. I'm Kru Rob Rogan, and thank you for listening to my story.